Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where it seems like it's a race to the bottom for Star Wars, DC, and Marvel. I'm listing them in the order in which they enter this race. And you know what? It's turning out to be a surprisingly close race to the bottom. I mean, we're coming off of the Marvels and the Acolyte, and just when you think it couldn't get any worse, here comes the Joker 2, delivering the biggest bomb yet. The industry is putting Joker 2 at an opening at 39, although Warner Brothers is insisting that there's a 4 in front of it. So much so that the headlines were amended in the trades. When they first hit, it was 39. Now it's 40, 39, 40. That's incredible. We'll find out the number for sure tomorrow. Remember, when Sunday numbers come in, they're not educated wishes. It's like from Deadpool and Wolverine. That's what the 40 for this movie is. That's I would suspect an educated wish. But usually in the industry, the box office numbers on Sunday are very highly educated guesses, which come off of decades of doing this. So that's why the numbers are almost always, within usually less than 1 million of what the final number actually is. It better not be lower than 39. All right, so the overseas box office, which I'm sure there are a couple of people, and I feel bad for you, because, it's no fun to watch your movie crash and burn that you're a fan of, that you've dedicated so much of your time to. But that's where we are. And so I'm sure some of you are pointing out that the overseas box office is better than the domestic debut, but it's also down significantly from the first film, and they both opened in about the same number of territories. In fact, Joker 2 has very few countries left to hit, and it's not expected, barring a last-minute miracle, and that's what it would have to be, that no audience anywhere on the globe is expected to come and save this movie. Joker has a lower critic and audience score than Megalopolis. And sure enough, Francis Ford Coppola praised Todd Phillips in the press yesterday, trying to get some extra publicity out of this for his own cinematic debacle. Because you know what's worse than people saying bad stuff about your movie? Not talking about it at all. Todd Phillips drank Francis Ford Coppola's awful milkshake. But while some people on social media, I saw them trying to get Jokeropolis going, like Barbenheimer, it didn't work. Megalopolis fell a staggering 73% in its second weekend. Will Joker 2 fall a similar amount next weekend? I think it's extremely likely that it will. Joker 2 has the lowest cinema score for a comic book movie ever, a flat D, not even a D+. And it cost $200 million to make before advertising. Many of you are wondering, where did all the money go? I've seen crazy allegations of money laundering, with the Acolyte and now this. The Acolyte had a lot of sets that were built and a lot of VFX. But in a movie like this, I'll tell you where the money goes, to paying people. Also, there were, as you can tell, extensive reshoots, scenes that were much grander were cut. You're not seeing everything that was done. Hollywood, has weird math. Why do you think that I call this show Movie Math? That's been a situation in Hollywood since its inception. It's just, becoming talked about more in the general public. But it's still $200 million just went up in smoke. The question is, who's 200? Megalopolis cost the same amount, by the way, but that was largely Francis Ford Coppola's own money. Todd Phillips got someone else's. That's how you do it. Many of you are saying Todd Phillips himself almost was the Joker in this scenario. Now, the audience scores were so bad, and the critic scores, but the audience score as well, that people were canceling their plans in real time as the weekend unfolded. I had 2 groups of friends that I was speaking to. I was going to go with one of them, and they both told me that they were not going to bother at this point. They decided not to go. They had, there's so many other things that you can do these days with your weekend. And a number of you, when I did a poll on Twitter, had the same response. A good chunk of you also canceled your plans. Streaming has created many problems for theatrical, and another one of them is that when a movie is this big of a flop, audiences know that means it'll only get on digital and then streaming even faster. So it's easier for them to say, let's wait. And that's something that, but what choice does Warner Brothers have at this point? They're like, let's just get people to watch it any way that we can. Do you think that you'll watch Joker 2 at any point? I think, as I said, there are some really great scenes in the film, but you'd have to be somewhat of a fan to want to see it. You'd have to be into film or into comic book movies or comic books, or a fan of Lady Gaga's to be like, well, I'd like to at least see it. But I'm curious, to what your plans are. You might just decide to skip it entirely. But it's a shockingly bad debut, but not just on its own. It would have been shocking even if it had just debuted as the first film. But the fact that it's the devastating follow-up to a hugely successful film makes it all the more shocking and all the more headline-grabbing. The ripple effect of this across the industry is going to be substantial. And I think for not only in terms of the size of it, but for how long. One would hope. I don't know what's going to give Hollywood a wake-up call. You keep thinking, well, surely this flop will do it. But they just won't do it. And we're going to talk about that right now. All right, so it's been getting harder and harder for Hollywood to face a reckoning that's long been overdue. Who is the main audience for genre fare? And subverting expectations seems to be a very bad idea. Although that's not how I would describe it. I don't think that's going to help solve it if you continue to look at it as subverting expectations. I mean, that's some of it. But where does that come from? Why are expectations subverted? And so you have to get to the root of the problem. And the root is, and I've been saying this for a little bit now, hiring people to adapt material that they are not fans of in the first place. So they don't get it. And they try to turn it into something that they can get. But then the people who made the IP worthy of being adapted in the first place are like, what the heck is this? And we still are seeing it happen. In projects that have just recently been announced, this is still the issue. And the warning signs were there as early as 2011, when Julie Taymor tried to present how she saw Spider-Man. Now, I saw that show. I appreciated it for what it was. Just like I've enjoyed other genre fare that has presented a different take and controversial take on established IP. And there will always be people that do appreciate those diversions and those different takes. But not enough to offset the huge costs of these productions. There just aren't enough. And also not enough to deliver the level of success that these franchises are capable of when adapted faithfully. You just can't keep doing this. There's always someone on social media who goes, well, I liked it. And then everyone goes, see, we should have therefore spent $200 million on it. And you're like, in what world does that make sense? So yes, Hollywood has been using the shrinking positivity and support on social media to make themselves feel better. Oh, pat on the head. They're like, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. These 5 people liked it. And you're like, what? It's too expensive for only 5 people to like it. And so they make themselves feel better. And they say about, the box office and the critic scores and audience scores, those aren't fair. And it's like, but it's the reality that you live in. It's just like when DC fans praise every announcement and they're like, I can't wait to see that. And then when it's released, where are they? However, that's not what happened here, interestingly enough. The whole reason that James Gunn has been so supportive of Elseworld stories is because those are the only corners of DC that were working when he took over. And both of them, by the way, have refused to join DC proper in hopes of staving off that horrible infection. They're like, we don't want to keep yourselves away from us. And I mean, everybody agrees that that is a mistake, but, they've been allowed to do it because so far, people thought, well, maybe that's helping them. And we want to continue that success. Also, an effort was made this past week to blame toxic fans, which they definitely exist, but let's talk about it. And by the way, in hindsight, just like we think we've came to realize why maybe they made so many other DC announcements this week, maybe that article came out earlier this week for a reason. But it didn't work because everybody just was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So the truth is, there will always be toxic fans, just like there will always be overly supportive fans. However, it's the actual quality of the product and its ability to appeal to the actual fan base of the IP that dictate which conversation will be the loudest. I'm not saying it's not crummy and that it can hurt things a little bit. You broke Margot Robbie's spirit. She wouldn't dress like Barbie anymore by the time she got to the Oscars. But if a project is well created and appeals to the fan base of the IP, it will still be able to, for the most part, rise above. Now, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing over the devastating failure of Joker 2. There's lots of places to point. We're going to do finger pointing in a moment. But first, I would like to say it would be also good for Hollywood to look in the direction of video game adaptations. Oh, they're having a moment. But some of us didn't like Super Mario Brothers, but in that case, it was far less than the people who did love it. See how that works? So yes, The video game space is enjoying a tremendous success in Hollywood, thanks to incredibly faithful adaptations, where the lead talent for the source material, look at that, is part of the process rather than gatekept by Hollywood. Remember back in the day, the whole reason the Halo movie was not made at first, when it was first a big hit game, was because Microsoft wanted to be involved in the production, and Hollywood was so dead set against setting that precedent that they chose not to make a Halo film at all. Oh, how things have changed, but yet some ways they have not. Yet Hollywood, particularly the film industry, should think about the fact that they are less and less the top choice for people when it comes to to entertaining themselves. They're like, what should I do this weekend? It's less and less go to the theater. It's more stream something, play something, read something, etc., especially for younger audiences. So, back in the day when they made that fateful decision with the Halo game, they were able to point to tremendous success to back them up. But now you're like, you guys don't have a leg to stand on. It's also worth noting that while Hollywood looked to the mega success of Deadpool and Wolverine as a sign that the comic book movie is not dead or waning, Ryan Reynolds gave the people what they wanted. That's almost the whole core of Deadpool and Wolverine, giving the people what they want. Ryan Reynolds does intense audience research. He has his finger like never before on the pulse of current audiences. And you see that so well reflected in the mega success of that film. Todd Phillips, he not only is not connected, but he has great disdain for those who apparently do like his work. So he did not give the people what they wanted, despite that even being a line in his own movie. All right, so let's start pointing fingers. Obviously, Todd Phillips is the most at fault, particularly because he had full creative control. That's one of the reasons you don't ever ask for full creative control, by the way. Here's a little tip for you, so there are other people to blame. That's the way it works. Also, like when you're just starting your career, you don't want to be the lead. You want to be supporting, so you get the good reviews, but the flop of the film is not your fault. That's how it works. And some of you might be like, isn't that what happened to Lady Gaga here? I'm sorry. No, it did not. She's the female lead. Even if they cut her part down to supporting. But yes, that's, you never want full creative control for that reason specifically. But just like Patty Jenkins had to take responsibility for destroying her own success with Wonder Woman 1984, a movie, by the way, I also appreciated, but I didn't like Joker 2. I liked moments in it. But Phillips obviously has to be just as culpable for Joker 2. But, and you'll notice it's the same studio. We're talking about that. So, who gave them full creative control? That's the bigger question. The studio suits. This is very embarrassing for the new heads of Warner Brothers Film Division, Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy. Everyone had been blaming the former suits at Warner Brothers for the debacle that was DC. And to be fair, Toby Emmerich infamously had no faith in the first Joker film, and after its huge success, it was him and his team that, pushed a sequel through. But they put it in development. They did not greenlight it, which means they approved it for production to go before cameras. That was DeLuca and Abdy. They put it into production, they oversaw it in post, and its release. And why has yet another film been butchered in post? The Snyder cut, the Ayer cut, and now it looks like we have the Gaga cut, which will always haunt people. I brought that up in my review. I knew that the Snyder cut was going to be an issue when I first reviewed Joss Whedon's Justice League, and I was correct. And I'm telling you, I don't think you'll ever see these cuts because the Snyder cut didn't do well enough viewership-wise, but there'll always be something that's out there. It's a shadow that will be cast over these productions and these fandoms. And again, why does it always seem to happen at the same studio? It's like, hey guys, I'm not saying it's only happening at your studio, but it is only happening at your studio. Also, while we're at it, where's the Batgirl movie and Coyote vs. Acme? Man, what's going on over there? So bad. All right, so clearly the original script and the likely original cut of the film were much better. Because why would the movie have been greenlit? Nobody would greenlight this. There's no movie here. Why would anyone sign on for it? Well, Lady Gaga wouldn't have signed on for this. And then, why was it changed? If you had something that was good, why did you just completely tear it to shreds? Some are saying that Joker 2 shouldn't have been shown so early in Venice, which allowed the bad critic score, although at that point at least it was still a fresh tomato, to solidify in the minds of the general public and the industry and the media for over a month. Well, Hollywood loves a formula, a pattern, and they were following the exact same release strategy behind the first Joker, which had also debuted at Venice. And you know what? It wasn't beloved by critics. It didn't have as bad a critic score coming out of Venice as Joker 2 did, but it wasn't great, and yet still the movie went on to be a huge success. So you can see why, although, I mean, I don't know, did anybody at Warner Brothers watch the movie? I mean, the final film and be like, what did we do to it? But you know who didn't follow the formula? Todd Phillips. He made a sequel for the exact inverse of the audience that supported the first film. And it's a choice so devoid of logic that one can only come to the conclusion that he simply did not want to be associated anymore with the group that supported the first film. Yet, while some in the media and on social media have tried to brand the first Joker film as an incel fever dream, you don't have that kind of success, box office-wise and awards-wise, without broad appeal. Speaking of inverse, we've been having an ongoing conversation about women not showing up for genre fare, even when it's aimed directly at them. They're like, this is for you, ladies. And they're like, I'm not interested. And we're like, what? They're not going to get interested. I mean, I don't know. I think someone's always like, I can interest them. And I'd be like, fine, but I'm not giving you $200 million. Ironically, the first Joker film was much cheaper. And so that's why they could take that risk, even though Toby Emmerich thought it was a dumb idea. And, they insisted on bringing down the budget for Beetlejuice too, for it to get, that was DeLuca and Abdi on that one, to their credit. The people who have shown up for genre fare, even when it's aimed at women, has been consistently men. We're like, well, the guys still came. But with Joker 2, it changed, which is so fascinating. A lot of men did not show up finally to support the film. Hollywood seems to have finally pushed male fans of genre content so far that they're no longer the safety net for it. Joker 2's audience was actually just 60% men. That's pretty good. It skewed young and it was largely Caucasian and Latino, with almost no interest from Black audiences. To me, that says that Lady Gaga fans did show up, at least in part, to support her. So that's nice for them, right? But here's the problem. There weren't enough of them in terms of ticket sales or to boost that cinema score. You could always argue that the Rotten Tomatoes audience score was maybe review bombed somehow. I mean, because it's not as scientific. Cinema score is a much stronger way to get an idea of the audience reaction to a film because it's hard to mess with. But all the Lady Gaga fans who showed up when Cinema Score said, what'd you think of the movie? There weren't enough of them to get it above a D. Like, they couldn't even get into the C range. All right, so let's talk Lady Gaga, right? This is a very unfortunate development for her career, as this was supposed to be her big comeback after House of Gucci, which was a big problem for her. It was a critical and commercial flop. I know some of you are trying to insist that it wasn't, but it was. And I even liked part of the film, and I thought Lady Gaga was fantastic in it. And it took a turn. I thought the film became not good when, what do you know, she was also oddly removed from it. They almost cut her entirely out of the third act, and the film suffered for it. And she was not able to get an Oscar nomination, her second Oscar nomination, which she had hoped for. It's the whole reason she made the movie. Joker, and I think that's the whole reason she made Joker 2, which, had seemed like it couldn't fail. I understand why she signed on. We all were telling her to sign on. We were all excited when she signed on, right? And Lady Gaga was, I think, perfect casting as Harley Quinn. Some people are blaming Lady Gaga for making it a musical. It wasn't Lady Gaga's idea to make it a musical, all right? And she's shown she didn't do any singing in House of Gucci, and she was fabulous in that movie. And we've seen amazing leaks from filming and the early trailers, so we know there was great material there. Yet little did we know that just as Todd Phillips was turning on toxic masculinity overall, he was still taking the toxic male viewpoint of women and applying it to Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn. One of the most offensive things I think about this film. Oh, Todd Phillips, as they say on the internets, when I find you. All right, so that's why I feel it would benefit Lady Gaga to politely, it's a business of relationships, but now I think Lady Gaga at this point is in survival mode. So I'd be like, be nice, but save your career. She should address the way her role was mishandled, sooner rather than later. I mean, Elizabeth Olsen is finally speaking up about how poorly her character was handled in Multiverse of Madness, but in some ways it's too late, long after the damage to her character and the actress herself was already done. So don't let this solidify Lady Gaga. This week, maybe, I'd do it this week. I mean, even just a tweet. She doesn't even have to go into specifics. She could just say, I'm sad that you didn't get to see my full role and what we filmed. And she could even say that with Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix that I created while filming. I'm so sad to see that that those who are fans of Lady Gaga and the character will never get to see it. Just to acknowledge that she was done wrong. Because I'd rather be having a conversation about how women are portrayed in genre movies instead of having the one that we are now having is should they be included at all, which is ridiculous. Like, I'm seeing comparisons to Furiosa, which flopped, but it was not because it had a female lead. It's because Charlize Theron's Furiosa, and they shouldn't have replaced her. Female-led genre content can and has done quite well. Alien, Terminator, Avatar, Wonder Woman, Mad Max Fury Road, Kill Bill, the entire careers of Michelle Yeoh, Angelina Jolie, Milla Jovovich, and Kate Beckinsale. Do female characters in genre fare need to appeal to men? Yes. I've seen some people saying, well, why can't we take the female sensibility? Well, I'm sorry, but the primary audience for these movies is men. So again, unless your budget's real low, you better make sure that group wants to see your movie too. And that doesn't mean that women can't also like these characters. And women like many of these characters. You know, a lot of these characters are very appealing to women. So it can be done, and it has been done. And if Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn had been allowed to be a proper Harley, I'm sure she would have been much better received. Yet nobody on Joker 2 was looking out for the best interest of Lady Gaga or Harley Quinn. Where are the, I mean, sometimes, I've said often that I think, there should be more women involved, and some male talent, behind the scenes doesn't know how to handle female characters. And you're like, well, what about the reverse, blah, blah, blah. This is the whole conversation that's being had right now about bringing in different voices to have authentic representation of perspectives and what people are, different groups from straight white men are actually like. Because you're seeing a diversification in audiences to some degree. And I think when that stuff is done authentically and organically, even straight male white audiences respond to that storytelling, as you're seeing with some other content. So I'm like Alien Romulus, for example, very well done. So why were there no women working on Joker 2 who were like, I just want to tell you, you're totally killing the character and hurting Lady Gaga's career. And I feel bad that Lady Gaga couldn't do anything about it. All right, and that's also something to discuss, There are rumors that some male talent has no problem making demands and throwing temper tantrums and insisting on changes being made. And perhaps women need to start doing the same and saying, you're killing this character in the actress's career. You got to toot your own horn, and that's not only, sometimes that's in an aggressive way. All right, I'd also point out, because just like, women are having to become more vocal about the pay discrepancy. Complex conversations. All right, I'd also like to point out that this is another big name who, after joining a genre movie, has taken a huge hit career-wise. And I've been long talking also about the DC curse, which is why it's becoming harder and harder for them to sign talent. But I think you're seeing that with all actors for all these big things, like DC, Star Wars, and Marvel. I think all actors are like, is it worth it? And I think often the answer is no. I'm also worried about the character of Harley Quinn. She's had a lot of flops at this point. Even the animated show, which is incredible, but it doesn't have a big audience. Yet the character was made so popular in the mainstream by Arkham Games and then David Ayer's version in Suicide Squad, which I have to say, both were through the male gaze, not G-A-Y-S, G-A-Z-E, and that's what really blew the character up. And so, at this point, despite flop after flop, Warner Brothers is still thinking they can make Harley Quinn work, and audiences still feel that maybe they can. There's still interest in the character. I still buy her comic book now and then. They're getting a new creative team. I'm going to try it again. Even though that comic book, I got to tell you, the Harley Quinn comic book has never been good. Ever. The whole time it's been in existence. It's never been good. And I've bought so many of them. All right, I guess we're partially to blame too. All right, so maybe that's what's also starting to change, with people not even showing up to hate watch Joker 2. I still want my Gotham City Sirens movie, but now I'm scared. I mean, the choice of writer-director is going to be crucial. I'd say, a lot of us were like, Greta Gerwig? But Greta Gerwig loves Barbie. She grew up playing Barbie, and I think that's one of the reasons she just so expertly tapped into it. And again, was able to explain that perspective so amazingly. I don't think Greta Gerwig reads comic books, or ever did. So I don't think she can do these characters. So I would say Paul Dini. I mean, he made Gotham City Sirens popular in the first place, but his work has been off as of late. And also, for some reason, he and Bruce Timm seem hell-bent on trying to fetishize the characters that they made popular in the first place. We're all like, ew, what are you guys doing? Still, I can't think of a better choice than Paul Dini. Just, you know what? The studio executives have to oversee the project and have some level of control. Oh my gosh. And by the way, I do think that maybe the colossal failure of Joker 2 might finally snap Hollywood out of these approving out-of-control budgets and paydays. I mean, it's said that you want to know where part of Joker 2's budget went? It's being said around town that $50 million of it went to pay Phoenix, Phillips, and Gaga. I mean, with Gaga, it's almost consolation money. You're like, well, at least she got paid a lot. I think she got like 10, I think 20 probably for both of them. I mean, they probably got back end too, but what back end? All right, so I'd almost be like, this is so bad, it's negative money. You give me some of my money back. All right, so I also think this is going to hopefully put an end to giving anyone full creative control over an IP that doesn't belong to them. I'd be like, this isn't yours. This is the company's, and you are borrowing it. So you can't have full creative control. I don't care how good your first movie was. I still have notes. All right, so then, of course, Joaquin Phoenix, we didn't forget about you. He'll always get some work. It's just the reality because he's got 4 Oscar nominations and 1 win for Joker, ironically. And he'd be willing to make very small movies, especially since he's now made millions off of Joker 2, no matter how it did. So he's set financially. And he'll have to make very small movies because only new filmmakers who are desperate for a name, any name, to be attached to their films, I think will work with him going forward. There's always someone who's like, I need a name. Okay, Joaquin Phoenix. And if it's for a small movie, I think people will give him, he's always done, out there work, which has always had mixed results. So that's the same. But here's another problem, though, which I think is going to keep him from getting work with established talent, at least for the foreseeable future. Not only this debacle, but now that it's known that he regularly bails on projects at the last minute. Now, the reason this had not gotten out into the general public or even to the rest of the industry beforehand is that they'd always been able to replace him at the last minute. James McAvoy said he was a last-minute replacement for Joaquin Phoenix on Split, and actually, I think, a better choice for the role. But anyway, there was finally a film where they couldn't replace Joaquin Phoenix at the last minute, and his luck ran out at keeping this really unprofessional behavior quiet. So yeah, I think, I did recommend that Lady Gaga might want to take a little bit of a break, maybe focus on getting a really big hit in the music space, or maybe make a small film that she self-finances, and produces. Margot Robbie had a horrible string of flops, and then Barbie turned things around, and that's because she produced it herself. Although it looks like Margot Robbie is going right back to the poor decision-making she had beforehand with her post-Barbie projects, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I think Phoenix is going to have a problem, and Phillips. I mean, I wouldn't feel sorry for anyone who lost money, particularly with Phillips. Here's the thing. I think with Phillips and Phoenix, it's on them. With Lady Gaga, she's a victim, but she is a victim, and I feel bad for what happened. I don't think it was her fault whatsoever, but she still took the hit, and I think, it would make me nervous because I have to invest money in her. If it was just this, I'd be like, not her fault. But House of Gucci is the problem, that they're back to back. And I thought she was so good in House of Gucci, and it was so poorly received. And I'm not seeing enough love for Gaga here, which is outside of her fan base. It's really tough. All right, 2 last points. Musicals. You got to let your audience know they're paying to see a musical up front. You just can't hide it. And I hope Hollywood has learned that lesson. It worked with Wonka, but that's because Wonka was so good. Then what does this mean for James Gunn? He backed The Flash very vocally, and he's like, ooh, not doing that again. And so he's been super quiet on Joker 2, focusing instead on The Penguin. But he didn't make either of these things. But when you're the head of a division, can you cherry pick like that? I don't see Kevin Feige not showing up. To Kevin Feige's credit, he shows up at every single event, even when things are not going well. Even Kathleen Kennedy bailed on the last D23 Expo for the most part. Feige shows up for the good and the bad. All right, to be fair, as I said, Gunn was not involved in any of these projects creatively. So, the flops or the hits. And I hope he's laser focused right now on making sure Superman is fantastic, because these are terrible opening numbers. And with the overall genre marketplace suffering and turning off fans, it's going to be an uphill battle to win them back. especially since, I think that this doesn't seem particularly new. It's like yet another Superman story so soon after the other ones. Although, people were excited about another Batman story, right? But although Superman has always struggled, everyone's always like, why do they keep pushing Batman? Batman sells the most. What do you want from me? So anyway, I do worry about Gunn's taste level, which I think kept his Suicide Squad and Peacemaker from having broader appeal. But it seems, based on the Superman comics that he's been spotlighting, that he is headed in the right direction for this one. I think the only thing he really needs to be concerned about is that his first trailer for Superman doesn't look like DC Guardians of the Galaxy, because then people will just be waiting for that, and it's going to start him on a bad note. He already started on a bad note with that first look picture. I don't know how that was approved. Really, is there nobody at the office you don't have to say it in front of the whole room. You can pull James Gunn aside and be like, okay, seriously, don't release that photo. But yeah, the first trailer, as long as it looks like its own thing and not DC Guardians of the Galaxy, I think he'll have a shot. And he could always recover, But I hope somebody in marketing is aware that just can't look like DC Guardians of the Galaxy when they're putting that trailer together. All right, as for the rest of the top 10, what other movies are out? Well, in fact, since everyone bailed on Joker 2, the holds are actually pretty good, except for Megalopolis. Although I also have to note that only the top 4 movies are posting numbers of any significance. The other 6 spots are all around just $1 million measly dollars. Oh, that's so bad. What's going to get people excited about going to the theater again? It was going so well there for a minute with Disney's Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. But also Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice was helping. Maybe Smile 2 in 2 weeks might be helpful. But the next big blockbuster is? Venom 3. Oh my God. Can the comic book movie space take another hit like that? Just another direct hit? I don't know. I'd be like, for the good of the whole industry, Sony, could you maybe move Venom 3? Let's see. Right now, we're not getting any big blockbusters until the holidays. First with Thanksgiving and then with Christmas. Although this year, there is no Star Wars movie and there's no Avatar movie. Disney is instead going to try with Mufasa. And we'll see if that is a suitable replacement. All right, over with streaming, as usual, starting with Nielsen for the first full week of September. At least a couple of shows and movies here are finally above 1 billion minutes. We're getting people back into this space. That's good. Nicole Kidman continues to do what she does best, and she might have her ups and downs quality-wise, but she's like the only actress to ever work more instead of less as she gets older, and still be cast as the sexy leading lady. Usually, as actresses get older, they're stuck playing moms and grandmas, but I gotta say, good for you, Nicole Kidman. And you can also see why Hollywood is so excited about Aaron Pierre. I'm so torn on whether or not he should take Lanterns. I'm like, I don't know. He's such a good casting choice for it, but I don't know. I worry about the DC curse. I worry about it. And also, you can see why Amazon is actually considering, a 3rd season of Rings of Power. What kind of bizarro world is this, speaking of DC? Joker 2 is a horrible flop, and people are watching Rings of Power? You just never know. Although I have to say, some people have pointed out that Rings of Power was allowed to continue, unlike The Acolyte, and seems to have found its footing and its audience. And I think that is a fair note. Again, I'd say bring the budget down. Maybe Amazon has not greenlit a 3rd season just quite yet. They're thinking about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of the stipulation was they brought the cost down. Also, in its first full week on Netflix, Lee Daniels' Deliverance did manage to get on the overall chart. On the originals chart, again, it's easy to see why Amazon is considering a 3rd season of Rings of Power, but it's not so easy to see why Hulu so quickly greenlit season 5 of Only Murders in the Building. These numbers are very low. It's weird. And this is the beginning of the season. So the start of the season was excellent. So I'm surprised that these numbers are so low. But I will say they're probably going to just go down because as the season has continued, I've lost interest in it. I think, again, the show just isn't strong enough this season to work with the week-to-week release. Although maybe everybody's waiting to binge. We'll see. Then with movies, again, very low numbers here for the most part. Although we see that with the sequel coming out, the OG Beetlejuice didn't just do well on digital, but on Max as well. Although Horizon has already fallen off this very low chart. Doesn't take much to get on this chart, and Horizon's already gone in just its 3rd week on Max. Ooh. All right, so with Netflix, here's Aaron Pierre again, still at #1, where he's been for 3 of the 4 weeks that the movie has been on Netflix. This is fantastic. Very exciting. Make your next choice extremely carefully, Aaron Pierre. Then with shows, Monsters, still #1, and it has a solid improvement. Last week on the chart, it was its first full weekend, but now it's had its first full week. And so it's gone up, but not, it's still not the level of Dahmer. But the fact that the miniseries might actually help get the Menendez brothers released, giving them a huge rush of attention and sympathy, that's pretty incredible for the show. In fact, Ryan Murphy has even said he might consider making new episodes with the same actors as the story develops. We'll see. It's fascinating. I really highly recommend the Monsters show. Also, this is just the first weekend for Nobody Wants This in runner-up spot. But the word of mouth on this show is tremendous. It's incredible. I expect we'll see it explode on these charts next weekend when it has its first full week. I'm actually going to start watching it. I've had so many people recommend it to me. Usually that kind of show isn't for me, but I need something to watch. It's half-hour episodes, so that's good. Although I'm working my way still with Interview with the Vampire. So good. Only season 1 is on Netflix, though. I guess I'm going to have to pay for season 2, but I will. I really like it quite a bit. It's an incredible show. Everyone on that show should be a star. I can see why the actress who plays Claudia got Avatar. I don't know if she got it before or after, but I'm a fan of everybody on that show. I'm like, everybody should get hired. In front of him, behind the camera. All right, also, not much interest for Vince McMahon nor Ellen DeGeneres, so it looks like those cancellations are sticking. I think there also might be too many stand-up comedy specials across all of the platforms, and they're not even really bothering to advertise them anymore. They're like, yeah, you want to watch this? Also, with so many specials, I think it's diluting the stand-up comedy space with too much talent. It used to be back in the day, there were only about a handful, of stand-up comedians that were like huge, like nationwide name, like household names, I guess is the way to say it. And usually they would become household names because they get a sitcom. That was the way it worked. That was the level of, that's how success worked. You go from the stage to the small screen, and then sometimes you could also even graduate to movies. But now, because of streaming and they're wanting so many comedy specials, there's just so many that I think it's harder and harder to stand out. Who do you think still moves the needle as a stand-up comedian? And also there's the new generation as well. Not too many new names though, a couple. All right, then on iTunes, as you would expect, Deadpool and Wolverine is #1, and the trilogy is also even in the top 10. And Speak No Evil is runner-up, which itself has just hit digital. The top 10, pretty much all recent theatrical releases, and also direct-to-digital Amber Alert with Abbott Elementary's Tyler James Williams and Hayden Panettiere. As for this coming week, Saturday night finally goes wide, and Pharrell's Piece by Piece looks to make its own box office and awards splash. There's also another My Hero Academia movie, which could actually do pretty well. And in limited release, We Live in Time, which is also hoping to be an awards contender. I don't really see it, but it's apparently a very sad movie. But I think it might do well, but I don't know if how it's going to do in the awards space. I don't know. There's room now that Joker 2 just imploded. And then Terrifier 3, which I know some of you are very excited about. Although, of course, the big story next weekend is going to be how much does Joker 2 drop in its second weekend? And will that create a space for any of these other movies that are opening? I don't know. I think people are just going to be turned off from movies for a little bit, which is not good for the industry. But how big do you think the drop will be for Joker 2 in its second weekend? I think it's probably going to be up there with Megalopolis in the 70s. On digital on Tuesday, here comes Warner Brothers' hit of the season. It's not even a huge hit, but it's a solid hit. Beetlejuice 2, the overseas this week. But it takes on its second life post-theatrical, where I think the timing on Beetlejuice 2 is excellent. I think it's going to do exceptionally well on digital. And also, the new Hellboy movie that some of you are excited about, well, it looks like it's skipping theaters, at least in the United States, and going right to digital. On streaming, Netflix has the Menendez Brothers documentary tomorrow. I hope they went through that. I was talking to somebody about that. It's like they're in such a perfect spot to, get re-released, and all the sympathy is working towards them. I hope maybe someone on their team looked at that documentary at the last minute and was like, do we ruin it? All right, and then also the movie Lonely Planet it's like, don't mess with it. It's perfect as it is. Just leave it alone. But here comes this documentary. And then also the new movie Lonely Planet on Friday. As for new series, the franchise starts on HBO and Max tonight after Penguin. It's extremely negative about comic book movies. I got the screeners. I stopped watching it after 3 or 4 episodes. They're very short. They're half an hour. But they're so negative about comic book movies. It's fine to address what's the craziness that's going on behind the camera, but they have such disdain for the comic book properties themselves. Like the movie that they're making is so stupid It's like, do you really think that Avengers Endgame made $2 billion and that's what people are supporting? It's very insulting. And again, an odd choice considering who do you think's going to watch this show? Except for people who like these movies. I predict nobody watches the franchise. We'll see. Well, and it's coming right after The Penguin, which is like disproving the whole, thesis statement of the franchise. But but he has good genre. Here's a good comic book adaptation. All right, then on Thursday, the animated Tomb Raider hits Netflix. I tried to watch those screeners, I couldn't do it. As well as more Outer Banks. Well, on Friday, Apple TV starts the All-Star Show Disclaimer. And that's this week's movie math. What have you been watching, and what do you plan to watch? And when it comes to Joker 2, where do you point the finger? And how does DC and genre fare in general get out of this mess? The Western went out of style. There used to be the fact people love the Westerns. The Western was like the comic book movie. People couldn't get enough of it. But then they made so many of them, the Western died and still hasn't been able to come back after all this time, unless there's a zombie in it. All right, so what do you think? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.